Hi guys, Neil at Italia Autos here. Welcome back to another video on my channel. This week we have a customer's Zoe Yellow 145 cloverleaf in the workshop. It's in pretty good condition, so I thought I'd give you a buyer's guide stroke how's it holding up. So I do believe this car has recently had a respray, so it shouldn't really have anything wrong with the bodywork side of things. 145s do generally hold up very well when it comes to the main sort of exterior part of the chassis. They don't tend to suffer that much with rust unless there's been sort of accident repairs or scratches that have then let moisture get into them. The side skirts are still fitting pretty well on this side. They are notorious for the clips breaking, and also the securing tabs on the side skirt can also come undone and sort of separate, so they won't clip back into position properly. They're also a bit of a pain in the backside to fully remove because they are screwed underneath, and sometimes, or most of the time, the screws are rusted away. Rear wheel is fine. Fuel cap's all fitted right. It is missing the little stop there though. Now onto the rear of the car. The rear lights on the boot lid are very susceptible for the fixing points cracking, so the screw will just spin and come out and the lights won't fit correctly. The lower reflectors are very susceptible for cracking. You hit them hard or hit them lightly with something and they will crack, and they're also quite hard to get hold of as well. Rear wipers as well are also very common for failing. It's pretty obvious this one works because you can see the lines there that's still going. But yeah, just through lack of use they normally seize up. The shaft inside seizes and rusts, but you can strip it all down if you're lucky and clean it all up and get it working again. I have done that a few times over the years. Rear badges are also very common for fading. As you can see, this one's on the way out as well, but they are pretty cheap to replace. Now you can just buy covers which go over the top. I think the exhaust's sticking out a little bit more than I'd like. See what I mean about the sill covers? This clip is come out and it's stretched the fixing on the inside, so that won't clip in unless you take the side skirt off and plastic weld it all together. The rear window here is very common for corrosion coming on this part here and also on this here. This is a separate part to the window, but as you can see, some rust starting to come through there. And we've got some aftermarket cloverleaf badges fitted. They're actually quite a lot larger than what the ones that should be on there. They're also a little bit too high as well. Onto the interior now. Two common problems with the door cards. It's the material on the door card coming away. You can see a little bit down there where it's coming away. Speaker covers are very easily broken when removed, so you will probably find tabs missing, them glued in, blue tacked in. And another problem can also be wear on this door pull. The seats can be quite common for going a little bit threadbare, but this one is okay. Steering wheel can show signs of wear on the leather, but what steering wheel wouldn't after 111,000 miles and 20 odd years? Dashboard, to be honest, it's normally no issues at all with the dashboard. They will work perfectly fine. It's got the original stereo in it, which is a Sony cassette deck. It does throw back memories of being 18 years old and throwing around in my puntos and things like that with that stereo in it. Throwing a few cassettes in there and playing some tunes. The thread on the passenger door is also coming off. Somebody's painted the headlining with some paint by the look of it, and it's not been done very well, so I'd probably recommend that it just gets recovered because it would look a lot better. Interior's been plasti dipped, but we've got some coming off in some certain areas, or part of it's been plasti dipped anyway. Dashboard, we have 0 warning lights on. Very common for these, for the airbag light to be on, because the connectors are very sensitive when you pull the seat back and forwards when the ignition's on. Rear seats, everything's all present there and accounted for. All the seat belts are there. Seat belts are not fraying at the edges, so they're holding up pretty well. Now let's have a look under the bonnet. This car has had a respray at some point, quite recently. Engine bay hasn't been done, which is understandable. Looking for rust now more than anything down the tops of the chassis leg down there. Now I'm going to be checking behind the turrets, because these are a very common place for rusting. That looks okay. It has been painted or something, treated at one point in its life by the look of it. Probably recommend removing these and keeping them out, because these are just a massive sponge for water. Checking here as well, if it has gone here, it can be very expensive to get it repaired correctly, because this is a structural area and a lot of people will find it difficult to weld this area and shape the right pieces into the right shape, so it always looks very unsightly when it is welded on the tops of the chassis struts. Reasonably new battery. That looks like a reasonably new top hose. No water leaking from anywhere here. This chassis leg is okay. A little bit of rust coming through at the bottom there where the clip's attached to it. Engine itself looks pretty tidy from the top, not that you can see much, but we did have a few oil leaks. And it looks as though, yeah, there was one coming from the top of the gasket here, but that's not there anymore, so that might just be residual oil lower down. Now let's just start it up so we can hear it. What we're listening for is a tapping sound when you first start it up. Now, which there isn't one, so the variator in this is pretty good. The engine starts up fairly fast as well, so you can tell it's reasonably healthy for a car which has done 111,000 miles. Now onto the underside, and immediately I can see tyres are getting worn. We have got cracking on the edge of the tyres, inside and outside. This tyre is also the same, pretty much the whole length of the tyre though, so this tyre is actually quite old. This is the 13-year-old tyre. Right, common problems with the 145 underneath, it's rust, and rust. They're the biggest things to look out for, but this one has been treated. Normally you get rust coming through all the way along here, up the back here, up the rear of the inner arches, at the rear here, up the back here, that can sometimes rot out, but this one is all nice and clear. We do have rust coming through, as you'd expect for a car which is over 20 years old. It has had some welding done to it. You can see along here the welds going around there. But generally, it isn't in bad shape for an old car underneath. Front subframe isn't too bad. We'll talk about the engine in a minute. Yep, not bad at all. It's going to want some welding there soon enough, because that jacking point is non-existent anymore. It's had some welding along here by the look of it. Yeah, another patch along there. It looks as though it's going to go through there relatively soon, so that's going to want another little patch there eventually. Handbrake cables, they are routed wrong. They should be routed through there. Rear discs are getting on a bit. Yeah, the brake pads are not touching the disc very well, so it's going to want some new discs and pads on there, and also a good clean up of the calipers. Exhaust is an aftermarket stainless steel one, so we shouldn't have to worry about that. The outer cover for the cat has disappeared, which is very common indeed. Nuts and bolts for the cat have rusted away. The front wishbones and anti-roll bar links look okay from what I can tell, but I will test them properly off camera. Front discs are quite badly pitted and corroded at the back there, so I'd recommend they get changed as well. Front tyre is on the limit of being illegal. I would say that's through tracking error because of how much life is left in the rest of the tyre. Again, on this side it's wearing quite thin, but it should still be just about legal, I'd say. Front radiator support rusting, but looks okay, still solid still. It looks as though the engine bay has been wax oiled at some point, but you can still see there's plenty of rust coming through. All along that front slam panel is a common point. The worst parts to look out for on 145s are the chassis legs underneath. You can see where the subframe meets the chassis. It's very, very common for rusting out there, and it is a right pain to get to with the engine in. So really, to repair rust there, the engine needs taking out. It's quite a major job there because it's a structural area. Onto the engine now. We've got an oil leak from the gearbox. It looks as though it's coming from up high, so it could be a seal on the top of the gearbox, on the end casing maybe, because it does look as though it's coming down and running that way. Also got an oil leak from the side of the gearbox. Can't quite exactly tell where that's coming from. It doesn't look as though it's coming from the crank seal. It looks as though it's coming high up, so it could be the rocker cover gasket. I've just put a new oil filter on it and some new oil in it. Now, I always suck the oil out of these because 9 times out of 10, these are rounded off or seized, and as soon as you pull them out, they're never going to seal again. As you can see, this one is leaking a bit already, but I haven't touched that one, so we're going to have a look at that one. It looks as though it's had some new lower radiator supports cut out and then screwed on, which isn't the way I'd personally do it. Another common rust point to check on 145s is inside the inner arches, and as you can see, it's starting to go there. It will also go behind the arch liner here, so it is worthwhile taking them out and checking behind there, but that is going to want some TLC. And also at the front here, it can go all behind there. So there we go, guys. That is the end of the buyer's guide on this one. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one. It is worthwhile saving these 145s. They are cracking little cars. They're brilliant to drive. It's a cheap way of getting into sort of the modern classic era of Alfa ownership. They are getting very thin on the ground now, or the ones that are available do need some TLC, mainly rust work and sort of paint work nowadays, but they are definitely worthwhile saving. I actually own 2 145s. I've got a modified one sitting outside which needs some needs to be sold. Basically, I don't use it anymore, and I've got my restored Zoe yellow one at the back of the workshop, which I also don't use, which technically should be sold, but I can't bring myself to sell it after all my hard work went into it. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next video.